Devotees, welcome to BhagavatSanga program. This is our Srimad Bhagavatam program. Currently, we are reading from Canto 10, Chapter 14, which is Lord Brahma's prayers to Sri Krishna. Today, we have a very wonderful and a very sincere devotee, Prashanth Prabhu. Prashanth Prabhu will be presenting the verses from this chapter. Hare Krishna, Prashanth Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji. I will share and then can get started. Let me know when you can see it. Are you able to see it?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay.
We can see.
Hare Krishna devotees. First up, want to thank Meena Mataji for this opportunity to present, and thank you to all the devotees for sharing your time and listening to this short class. We are, like Mataji said, we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 14, verse 1 through 40. This is prayers that Lord Brahma gives to Krishna after the pastime of the Brahma Mohan Lila, which is the pastime I'm sure everybody has heard of, where where Brahma takes Krishna's cowherd boys and cowherd away, and Krishna manifests and expands himself to be cowherd boys and cows for a whole year, and then Brahma realizes his mistake, and these are the prayers that he then prays to Krishna for. So before we start, we will just start with quick prayers. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Guru Shri Shrungavad Paschat Deshtarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaurav Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. And as we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, we will say Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya 3 times. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. With that, we'll get started. So, like I said, everybody's aware of the pastime, but I wanted to highlight a few verses that I think the first presentation we focus more on I focus more on the actual pastime and what Brahma was saying. In this class, I wanted to focus on kind of what the themes that Brahma is saying throughout his verses, and what ultimately what I thought Brahma is helping us understand through his prayers. So the first verse, Brahma first, when he starts praying, he praises the Lord. He talks about the opulences of the Lord, and he explains explains Lord Krishna in so many different ways, and ultimately he kind of concludes in this verse in verse 19, where he says, to persons ignorant of your actual transcendental position, you appear as part of the material world, manifesting yourself by the expansion of your inconceivable energy. Thus, for the creation of the universe, you appear as me, Brahma. For its maintenance, you appear as yourself, Vishnu, and for its annihilation, you appear as Lord Trinetra or Shiva. So leading up to this verse, there's several verses where Brahma calls Krishna many, many things. So, he starts by saying that Krishna is the king of cowherds. Right? Krishna is the person that gives pleasure to all cows. Right? He's the king of cowherds. He's the Saka, friend to all the cowherd boys. So that's why he's the king of cowherds. Brahma calls Krishna and reiterates that Krishna is the supreme controller. He's the maintainer of unlimited universes, and that he's the original Narayana. Brahma also says that that when the world is being created, from Vishnu, from Vishnu's navel comes the lotus flower, and from that lotus flower, Brahma comes. So Brahma is reiterating in so many different ways who is Krishna, to help us understand how Krishna is the supreme controller. Krishna is the maintainer. Krishna is the all-pervading, across everything that we're able to see and experience. Krishna is the controller, and he's the person that is behind it all. He says he calls Krishna the super soul that's within every entity and every living being. He reiterates that Krishna is the controller of all Maya. And then finally in this verse, right, he says, in creation, Krishna is appearing as Brahma, and in maintenance, he's appearing as Vishnu, and in annihilation, he's appearing as Lord Shiva. To then conclude all of it by saying, no matter where in the cycle of creation you are, Krishna is behind all of it, and it's the same Krishna that's the king of cowherd boys, and he's also the same Krishna that's that Brahma comes from, and he's the same Krishna that controls Maya. And in the next couple of verses, he says Krishna is, by all of these definitions, then the absolute truth. So I think he really helps us understand through his prayers that in so many different ways, Krishna is the ultimate controller. So the next, so that's kind of the first set of verses. Is Brahma helps us understand how paramount Krishna is to our existence, and how Krishna is everything. So then the next kind of next set of verses where Brahma starts talking about is how people don't recognize Krishna. That now that he's kind of established, Brahma is established that here's all the different ways that Krishna is supreme, and Krishna is the supreme personality. He talks about how people are ignorant and don't understand Krishna, even though Krishna is everywhere, even though Krishna is the supreme controller. So in this verse, he says, just see the foolishness of those ignorant persons who consider you to be some separated manifestation of illusion, and who consider the self, who is actually you, to be something else, the material body. Such fools conclude that the Supreme Soul is to be searched for somewhere outside your Supreme Personality. So in this verse, Krishna is telling us that if despite understanding of that, Krishna is everywhere, and so Krishna is a supreme controller, you're still deciding that you don't want to recognize Krishna as the supreme. you're basically just a fool, right? You're searching for Brahman, or you're searching for something that's not going to give you what um, you desire, and what's not absolute truth. You're going to um, find yourself in the cycle of birth and death, because you're not recognizing Krishna for who he is, and recognizing Krishna for being the supreme personality of Godhead. So the only way we so what I kind of understood from that is, and from this verse is, you know, the only way you can get out of any bondage, or you can get out of any um, uh, uh, material entanglement, is by recognizing the supreme personality in its absolute truth, right? And saying that, Krishna is the supreme personality. He's the individual controller. Um, we are just part parcel of Krishna, and um, you know, without recognizing Krishna, everything else that we would do is just getting us into bondage. And in the summary, Prabhupada writes that liberation and bondage are unreal, for it is only from the living entity's perspective or outlook that bondage and liberation are produced. So um, what I took away from that is, with respect to this verse, is um, we if we don't recognize Krishna, then all we will be able to see in our world is that conditioned outlook of bondage. We will think that, if that because there's no Krishna, because we're not seeing that Krishna is the supreme, or we believe something else, um, what we'll always end up with is being in bondage, or having that duality of perspective of having been in bondage or not in bondage, and thinking that, oh, I'm in this stage now of bondage, but if I merge with Brahman or something, then I'll be liberated. But that's never going to happen, right? Because we are eternally going to be serving Krishna, and our goal is to serve Krishna in in Vrindavan, right? So we can never merge with Krishna. We are separate part and parcels. So um, it's that. So what I took away from this verse is that, just that, right? So unless you recognize Krishna to be a supreme personality of Godhead, and that he's actual personality, then you'll always be stuck in this, oh, I'm in this state of bondage now, and then when I go to my next stage, then I will be in liberation. But it's not that, right? We're always going to be separate from Krishna. We're going to be serving Krishna, but we want to get to that where we can truly serve Krishna with love and devotion. So that's kind of the second set of verses, is where Brahma explains how explains the perspectives of people that don't believe in Krishna being the supreme personality. So the next set of verses that Brahma talks praise and is gets into is this verse here. So here, Krishna starts to again glorify the people that are practicing Krishna consciousness, are recognizing Krishna, right? So we started at the beginning with with Brahma glorifying all the different aspects of Krishna, and how Krishna was supreme, and then he went into saying, hey, if you don't believe this, then you're basically a fool, and you'll always be stuck in this construct of bondage or liberation. And then now he's saying, look at all the people of there's several verses here, but he goes into what people should pray for to be able to get to that stage of serving Krishna unconditionally and with devotion and with love. So in this verse, he says, my dear Lord, I therefore pray to be so fortunate that in this life as Lord Brahma or another life, wherever I take my birth, I may be counted as one of your devotees. I pray that wherever I may be, even among the animal species, I can engage in devotional service to your lotus feet. So this verse is highlighting what we should aspire to do to get to that stage of being able to serve Krishna and being able to recognize that he's the Supreme Personality. So the next verse here is where he really talks about the people that we should aspire to be like, right? So the first step is being a devotee, right? Is we should pray to be a devotee and work to being a devotee. Then we should take inspiration and example from the residents of Braja, right? So in this verse and in several verses, he talks about how the greatest benediction or the greatest what we can hope for is to be born, as even a small blade of grass in Vrindavan, so that we could be an association of pure devotees and we can be serving the Lord in whatever little way that we could. So in this verse, Brahma says, my greatest possible good fortune would be to take any birth, whatever in this forest of Gokula, and have my head bathed by the dust falling from the lotus feet of any of its residents. Their entire life and soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mukunda, the dust whose lotus feet is still being searched for in Vedic mantras. So Brahma really elevates the position of devotees in this verse. He's saying that the dust of the devotees is what we should aspire for. And, the way I took that is we should aspire to serve, we should aspire to constantly serve devotees in in everything that we do, right? So if we're able to serve devotees and if we're able to serve our guru, spiritual master, and serve Prabhupada's mission, that's how in this current world we can practically do what Brahma is praying for here. And that will help us set ourselves up for being a better devotee, recognizing that Krishna is supreme and not being caught up in entanglement or disillusionment or whatever it might be. So the next verse. So the next verse here is the last verse in his prayers. So here Brahma says, ultimately, my dear Sri Krishna, you bestow happiness upon the lotus-like Vrishni dynasty and expand the great oceans consisting of the earth, the demigods, the brahmanas, and the cows. You dispel the dense darkness of your religion and oppose the demons who have appeared on this earth. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, as long as this universe exists and as long as the sun shines, I will offer my obeisances unto you. So from the beginning, right? So Brahma starts by recognizing how great the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, how great Krishna is, and how he's the Supreme Controller. And then he talks about how in so many different ways he's the Supreme Controller. And then Brahma talks about how Krishna is misunderstood by people, and we, even though we can see that we can feel Krishna's everywhere, and we can feel Krishna's presence everywhere in our, through the super soul, through everybody around us, through the world around us, we still feel that, you know, there's something else other than Krishna that is what we should be striving for, and that's, that's the disillusionment and attachment to our body, whatever it is. That's We should strive to not do that. And then he gets into the last couple of verses, which we talked about, which is um, that we should aspire to be pure devotees, and we should always try to serve. We should aim to be very humble, serve devotees, and take inspiration from the residents of Braja Vrindavan, and follow their example of always thinking about Krishna, never forgetting Krishna. And he concludes in this verse by saying, how how for all of going forward, no matter what happens, Krishna is this shining light, right? That we can hold on to. He's the person that's giving us hope. Um, he's 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 the supreme personality, as it says here. But it is, as long as he is there, and as long as we strive to serve him, you know, we'll always be protected, and we'll always have um, hope. So you know, it the understanding that we can take away is, how great and good fortune the residents of Raja have, because they can always be next to Krishna, who is, you know, uh, dispelling their darkness. He's opposing demons, and he's um, helping the residents, continue to serve him and interact with him. Um, so that's what we should aim for. And then how fortunate do we have to be even born there as a blade of glass or a bush or a creeper? Because by doing devotional service and hoping for that, we can hope to somehow serve Krishna even in our limited capacity. Um, so what the next couple of things I wanted to talk about is, there's several different ways that in all the verses that um, Brahma highlights how we are we're suffering, um, and I think that kind of helps us bring it all together, because I think in the pastime what happens, right, is Brahma thinks himself to be the controller, right? Brahma thinks that, oh, I'm Brahma, and this is just a cowherd boy, and I will take away all of his friends and his cows, and I will see what happens, because Brahma thinks he's the controller. But I think that that was for the pastime, but it helps us understand that those are the kind of things that we should be wary of, and that's what causes our our suffering. And in the verses and purports, Brahma talks about, like, and in Gita and all the other literature that we read, we talk about how we identifying with the body, we're thinking that we're the controller. We have attachment to sense gratification. I want this, I want that, or we have desire for enjoyment separate from Krishna, and we don't put Krishna in the center, and we put ourselves in the center. Or disillusionment or duality, where like like Brahma said in one of the verses, you can, if you see a piece of rope to be a snake, then that's what you will believe, right? But unless somebody tells you that it's just a piece of rope, you won't be able to ever know. But so that disillusionment, the duality, fear of all different things, lack of purpose or direction, lack of faith, lack of association or spiritual guidance, and then ultimately it's ignorance of the Supreme Lord and his devotees, and not understanding that the world is full of miseries, and we have to um, we have to, in this world of misery, still try to find, we have to find Krishna, or else we're always going to be in that duality of liberation or bondage. Or we could, and the last thing, that why we might be suffering is, some sort of Vaishnava aparadh, right? So all of these things, what I wanted to highlight here, and similar to kind of how what happened with Brahma is it's all of our own doing, right? Because Brahma made that choice to try to see if he could trick Krishna, but you can't trick Krishna, and we are, by doing any of these things, we are trying to trick ourselves into thinking that we are the controller, or we are the people that um, we thinking that we are the controller, or giving into our false ego or illusionment or whatever it might be, but it's really that we are the cause of all of our own suffering. And Prabhupada says, we act according to our whims, and the resultant action is there immediately. Nature's law or God's law is there. It's not God's creation that somebody is suffering from some painful condition and somebody is enjoying. We infect ourselves with some contamination because this material world is full of contamination. So we have to be very cautious, otherwise you will have to suffer. So all of that said, right, it's how do we progress in seeing Krishna everywhere? And there's several verses where Brahma clearly explains it. At the very beginning, in verse 4, he says, devotional service unto you is the best path for self-realization. I think that's what we're all striving for here, right? Is to do devotional service. And then in verse 5, he says, offer all endeavors unto Krishna and faithfully carry out your prescribed duties, and then perfect the process of hearing and chanting. So that's, I think we hear that everywhere, and Brahma is repeating it for us to clearly say, hey, this is what you need to do to stop your suffering, and stop your disillusionment, and your disillusionment, and thinking of and being in the perspective of bondage or liberation. And then finally, it's through doing these things, it's purifying the mind and senses of all material distinctions and attachments to material sense objects. So that's as we see it in our stages of bhakti, right? That's like anartha-nivritti is where where we start purifying and get rid of our anarthas. But ultimately, right, it's our ABCDs. Associate with devotees, read books, chant the holy name, and then diet, only take prasadam, follow regulative principles. And that's what Srila Prabhupada has distilled for us from all of Brahma's prayers so nicely. Is that's what you need to do. If you do those 4 things, then you'll be okay. So I will end here. I will again, please forgive me if I made any mistakes or said anything incorrectly. And Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Mataji, Prabhuji, and thank you everybody for listening.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. That was a really very nice, wonderful presentation, Prabhu. You beautifully covered the verses and your realizations. You said how if we don't recognize Krishna, then we'll always be in this bondage, and we'll be in the duality. So wonderful point. And some of the other points that I like is we should pray to be a devotee and aspire to be at least like be a blade of grass. That was beautiful. So that the lotus feet of the dust of the feet of the devotees fall on us, right? I mean, Brahma is telling that. It's like amazing. Yeah. Brahma is able to do that.
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah, and very nicely explained why we are suffering. Those points, I think you really summarized. I mean, I could personally relate to a lot of those points. So very nice, Prabhu. And finally, you covered how to go ahead, right? I think we need that constant reminder of what we should be doing. So Very wonderful presentation, Prabhu. Thank you so much for presenting. And with that, devotees, I have a quick announcement. We will not be having the BhagavatSanga program next week because the very next day we have a very grand celebration of Diwali, followed by Govardhan Puja. That is November 4th and 5th. It's going to be grand celebrations. Devotees are doing a lot of services to make it a great success. So we request all of you all to join the festivals. With that, Satyasara Prabhu, would you like to add a few words?
No, Mataji, thank you very much. Thank you, Prabhu. It was a fantastic class. Hearing you is always a pleasure, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for the opportunity.